Welcome to ENside Politics, the weekly podcast on how San Antonio politics really work. I'm Greg Jefferson, Metro Editor of the San Antonio Express News, and I'm joined today by City Hall reporter Molly Smith. Welcome. And our special guest today is Gordon Hartman. And you have a long resume. Very long time ago, residential real estate developer, but it feels like eons since
20 years ago. That's been 20 years now.
That was when you built your last house.
Yeah.
So now you're a philanthropist and founder of Morgan Wonderland, and you're on the show today because you were one of three chairpersons of Renew SA, which is the political action committee campaigning for the passage of 6 city charter amendments. Yeah. So let's just jump right in.
Yeah, from what I've seen of your campaign, it says little about what the actual amendments would do, particularly Proposition C, which is the one that relates to the city manager and removing the caps on the pay and the tenure, and Proposition E, which is the one about raising council pay. I wanted to know whether that's intentional.
Well, yeah, because really a couple of them are just cleanup amendments or propositions where we change some language, update some language. Over the years, some things have changed, and there's some need to do that. And there's an opportunity for people who are members of who work for the city who would now be able to participate in elections. So those are not really ones that probably require a whole lot of discussion. So you're right, there has been a focus on those two, probably on 3 when you really think about it. The city manager pay, and then also time in office or between elections, if you will. If you like, I like to talk about the city manager one, C, because I think that's a very important one. We can go back to 2018 when that all started. It was all kind of okay until 2018. And firefighters decided they wanted to see if they could make an adjustment to that. As you all know, there was a lot of back and forth between the firefighters and then city manager, which caused that to occur. I was very involved in that, by the way, because I was actually raising money to be able to allow for us to defeat that. And believe it or not, before Election Day, we actually won early voting. So it was an incredibly close race. It was, I don't remember the exact numbers, but 49-51. I mean, San Antonio was just basically right in the middle in that respect. So here we are now, and why is it being asked to make that adjustment? And the reason is because San Antonio is a big city. Yes, we have a lot of small city charm. We're a great city. I've lived here all my life. It sounds boring, but it's the truth. But I'm glad I've had that opportunity. And I've watched the city grow. And now that we have almost a $4 billion budget, we're right at $4 billion, 14,000 employees. You have a city council, which basically works, as you know, as you have a chairman of the board, the mayor, and 10 council members that basically serve as the board of directors. And then there's a CEO, and that's basically your city manager. If you were to go to any organization of a company of this size, the pay of that person who would be the CEO would not make hundreds of thousands, would make tens of millions to do something like this. That's not expected. We all understand that the city manager is not expected to make that kind of money, and nor is that what is being asked here. But I think there also needs to be an element of fairness, number one. And number two, I think we also need to be competitive. Fairness in that right now, Eric Walsh, our current city manager, makes $374,000 a year.
And that's because he's capped at 10 times the pay of the lowest employee, and that rate is $18 an hour.
Right, that's correct. Right. And so that's not a little bit of money. Don't question it. $374,000 is a lot of money. But when you start to look at what his job is and what he has to do on a consistent basis in overseeing, first of all, he has 11 bosses. He has 26 different departments. He has a deputy and then 5 other deputies to the main deputy. I mean, that is a enormous position of which I can guarantee you, knowing and watching that position over the years and many of the things that I've been involved in, it's a 60-hour-a-week job, and I'm not making that up. It's you can get texts from any city manager at 11 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the morning because they're constantly working. So I think we have to be competitive to be able to ensure that when we bring in someone asking them to do a job of that type, that we pay them competitively. When you look at other cities, we're the only city that has this type of cap. And we're growing, and we need to be smart. And we're going to continue to grow. Texas is going to grow. San Antonio is really at the has an incredible opportunity to grow, but it's got to grow right. And the policies that are set up at city council need to be followed through well by the person who's given that job, and that is the city manager. The most important job. This is a city manager form of government. We don't have a strong mayor form of government. If we did, we might be having a different discussion right now, but we don't. We have a strong city manager form of government. And for that, to pay that person $374,000 a year, and then also say, by the way, if you're real good at this job and we really, really like you, when year 8 comes up, goodbye. There's no common sense to that. It just makes no sense. So why are we looking to do it? We did it because there was some political back and forth 6 years ago, which caused us to be in this spot. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, what's going to happen if this does not pass is you can agree or disagree with Eric's done a good job, but right now the council feels he's doing a pretty good job. I think if you were to talk to council, they would say that he's doing a job that maybe he should stay longer than 8 years. I don't know if that will be the decision of the council. But it's the bottom line is let's be competitive. And there's a lot of other cities close to our size, some bigger, some smaller, who pay more money. And if we don't make this adjustment, we're going to get what we pay for. And I hate to say that because when you get what you pay for in a position like that, that causes an enormous amount of problems downstream. You get people who are not competent at other positions potentially, and that can cause a lot of problems. And that's my biggest concern.
When I look at Renew SA's website, I don't see any mention, however, of the 2018 history about it. And I also don't see any mention about the pay cap. When I look at it, it talks about how if the amendment is passed, it will remove the current 8-year term limit a city manager can serve, but it says nothing about that cap on that person can make no more than 10 times what the lowest paid employee makes. And I wanted to know why those details aren't in those campaign materials.
I can't answer that. I don't know that. That's why you have me here, is to answer those questions and to tell you why. Maybe that's something that needs to be adjusted. But what you're 100% right. It is 10 times the amount. And look, when someone's making 10 times the amount of the lowest paid person, there's need for focus to say, is that really fair? And the answer is, it's not really truly fair when you look at what you're asking that person to do. It's not a good structure by which to hire someone and set their salary. When you look at, and I'm not saying that their salaries are wrong, but when you look at the people who run SAWS, you look at the people who run CPS here, you're looking at a considerable amount more money on a position that is very important. But if we were to reduce those, we would not get good people in those positions. And so we have to be careful as a city, as we continue to grow, to have the right person there doing the type of job that we expect them to do. And if you're going to limit it to that amount, and then you're going to say, by the way, there's no real long-term future here, because if you do a real good job, we're going to have you leave. It just doesn't make good common sense. I mean, I could say this over and over, but it's really just about good common sense.
How much of this is about, I understand what you're saying. What you're saying makes sense. But how much is this about retaining Eric Walsh? His time is up in February 2027.
No, this isn't about retaining Eric Walsh. I personally think Eric's done a pretty good job. Do I think on some things he hasn't? Yeah, and Eric and I know council has expressed some concerns on some things that Eric has done. But we got to look to this is about the future of San Antonio. If we miss this opportunity, at some point Eric Walsh is not going to be the city manager of San Antonio. But we've got to have a system in place so that when Eric Walsh is no longer the city manager, that we're paying that city manager adequately. Otherwise, we're going to have one. And for the amount of cost difference that we may be talking about, maybe $100,000 to $150,000, I'm just throwing that out. When you're looking at a $4 billion budget, is that really a smart way? I was in business for 20 years, and what I wanted to do is I wanted to make sure I had the best of the best people. I wanted people around me smarter than me. And the only way I was able to get that is to pay them really well. And when you're looking at that, and you're looking at a council that sets policy, a person who has 11 bosses, a person who's very visible, a person who's very public, a person who has a lot of different ins and outs of what they have to do, has to deal from a political standpoint, also with all the fiscal elements and all the different parts and pieces that come to running a city, and to say we're going to pay them what we pay here in San Antonio is a major, major problem to us having long-term opportunity to make sure we get the right person in that job.
Right. Now, and I understand you're not involved in the nitty-gritty of the campaign itself.
I'm not, no.
Right. But I mean, so far, what we've seen of the campaign, it says nothing about the restrictions that voters approved in 2018. Just, I'm sure there have been internal discussions maybe that you've been a part of, within the PAC. Is it the case that you just don't want to address something that voters may still support, that being caps, both salary and tenure caps on the city manager? And it's better to not even talk about them.
No, I don't think it has anything to do about it. I don't know why that's not on. And I'm glad you're bringing that up. I'll check into why that's not there. I brought up the 2018 thing right out the bat here. I know exactly what that was all about. And unfortunately that happened. Like I said, pre-election day, it won the early vote. It was election day when you had firefighters at every polling place, and people have a hard time when someone's walking in with a firefighter, who I have enormous amount of respect for, saying, would you vote this way? And they walked in and said, sure, I'm not going to say anything negative or do anything against that firefighter. And that's okay. But the point being is it was a mistake. And because of that, we need to, what the charter team, I think, did a good job. It said, yeah, this does not make good sense from a city perspective of where the city is going and what it needs to do and the type of people it needs to have to manage. 14,000 employees. I've run companies of lots of employees, and I can tell you the type of money that's being paid to Eric Walsh. In that respect, Eric could go wherever he wants to go. We are blessed as a city to have Eric or anyone in that position for the amount that it pays, to be honest with you. And if we start to get into a situation where we're going to say, well, we're really going to restrict that and just keep that really tight, long term, that's not good for this city. And when you look at the overall, let's just deal with the reality of the overall amount of money we're talking about. It's not like we're talking $250,000 or $1 million, we're not talking large amounts of money. And I don't want to say it's a rounding error because I think that's a terrible way to say it, but it's not a big amount of money when you're looking at a $4 billion budget to make sure that $4 billion is managed properly. That when you're looking at that budget, you understand it, that you have longevity is a good thing. I believe that if you have a good city manager, they ought to stay a long time. The council should not remove them if they don't like them, and that's their prerogative to do so. Remember, Eric is good for 72 hours. I mean, call a meeting and in 5 minutes he's gone. I mean, that's how quickly he can lose his job. Right. With 11 bosses, that's pretty tough. Right. So you got to pay that person right.
Do you think is it possible for a city manager to stay too long? Do you think Cheryl Scully, did she stay too long? She was here for 13 years.
Did she stay too long? I think Cheryl Scully did some good things for the city. I think look, I don't think you can look at it. I mean, we can go all the way back to the Huebner days and we can go back to many.
It's going way back.
Way back, yeah. Right. I'm showing my age there. But you can go back to those times and say, well, was that a mistake that how long he stayed and why he left and all that? We could always debate that. I think this is about just having a structure in place, whether the person is going to be here 4 years, 14 years, or whatever the case may be, but pay them properly. You never let go of someone for doing a good job. You keep people because they do a good job. Right now, the council, the people who are voted in by the citizens, collectively right now feel Eric is doing a good job. If they continue to feel that way, fine. But if they continue to feel that way in 3 years from now, it doesn't matter because he'd have to be gone. He'd be gone in 2 years. And I just don't think that's a good way to make decisions. I think decisions ought to be based on performance and whether or not a person's good, not because a clock ran out on them.
What do you think would be an appropriate salary for Eric Walsh?
You know, I don't really know what that appropriate amount would be. I've heard different figures, all from all over the place. Okay, but if you were to say, well, Gordon, you're going to answer that question for me. If I had to give you a number, I would say somewhere around 450 would probably be a number that would probably be, even though that is way lower than he could make in the private sector. Not even, I mean, remember, in the private sector, he's a 7-figure opportunity. Okay. But I would say somewhere of 100 to 125,000 more. But that's for council to decide, to make sure that whatever candidates they get. When someone comes to me and as a business person and negotiates, I sometimes have two people and I really want another one over another one. I'm going to pay that person more money if I have to get the right person. So to try to say, well, it's got to be in this box doesn't allow for us to have that flexibility to be able to do what we need to do as a city to be able to be a city that is going to continue to grow. And to have what I'm going to refer to as a non-common sense approach to the highest ranking person who manages all the elements of a city to say, we're going to put all these handcuffs on you, it's just a mistake. It's just a mistake.
The firefighters union came out against Proposition C. Does that scare you?
No, it doesn't surprise me a bit. Let me tell you why. Not surprised one bit. They want the weakest city manager they can possibly have. They want that city manager to make nothing and get a weak city manager. You know why? Because the city manager is involved in the negotiations of their contract. So of course they want the weakest city manager. Didn't surprise me a bit. Everybody's like, did you see? I said, of course they're going to do that. They want to keep the system the best they can so they can get the best contract they can to council. And the city manager helps play a role in that process. So that doesn't surprise me a bit.
So are you talking I'm sorry. Are you talking about a system where you've got a weak city, you kind of weaken the city manager by having these caps on them?
Yeah,
but you're talking about them going directly to city council and trying to influence negotiations that way.
Yeah,
through
look, the city manager is involved in the negotiations
Right.
with the firefighters and the police union and all the unions. He or she is involved in that, right? That's kind of what got us started in this whole thing. Okay, so let's talk going back to 2018.
Yeah.
But my point is of course they want someone weak in that spot. That's a smart political move on their part. That's a smart move for them to be able to say, yeah, let's keep this person kind of down here where we can manipulate potentially that position to be able to get the most that we can get when we negotiate our contracts versus bringing in a person who is paid better and adequately understands they have potential to be here long term and can negotiate something that's going to be fair for the citizens of San Antonio. So let's talk about that for a second. Let's say this does not pass and we have it, someone comes in 2 years and we renegotiate with the firefighters. For that difference in amount, let's call it $150,000, the city will lose tens of millions of dollars if it's not negotiated right. And that's why you need someone who's good at that. Look, right now, what do we have? We have a fire unit and a police unit that have contracts, right? We do. And Eric, working with council, et cetera, was able to achieve that. And I think that says something about Eric himself as his ability. Whether or not council wants to keep him long-term or whatever, but on this particular subject, he was good at being able to do that. But you bring in someone in 2 years and now Eric's gone, they want the weakest person possible in that spot. So you bet, if I was a firefighter, no to Proposition C. But that's not good for San Antonio. And I think it's wrong. I'm not going to, well, they have their right to do whatever they want, but I think it's wrong for the city to be to be told by a group of that type in a selfish way to say why they want to keep a weak city manager, because they know not paying a city manager properly will bring about a weak city manager, which will bring about a weak city, which will give them advantages at the bargaining table. And that's not right.
Is that assuming that that low pay would attract someone from outside the city who would be coming here as a stepping stone? Or is it assuming that you're going to have a deputy city manager or assistant city manager in that role? Because I think some folks would look at some of those individuals waiting in the wings, Deputy City Manager Maria Villagomez, and say she would actually be a very strong city manager. She's been very strong in her career up against the unions, and has really been advocating for the best interests of City Hall.
Well, I think, first of all, could she make a good city manager? That would be up to council to make that decision. But I mean, I think in respect to, I don't know if she wants the position. I don't know that. I don't think she's publicly come out and said, I want that position. So I don't, if that's what you're conveying, I've not heard that. She may not want the position. She may, if this does not pass, she, along with Eric and some of those deputies, may move on. You know, that's another good thing I want to mention. You know, you have 5 major deputies working under the city manager. And I can tell you, just watching Eric and the work that he's done, because he's been there now for a period of time since Cheryl Scully left, he's done a good job putting a team together. Now you come in 2 years and go, let's disband all this. Okay, let's find out. New person comes in, wants to disband it. That causes all sorts of inconsistencies, planning, all sorts of adjustments to a city that's on the go, and then we have to call a timeout. No sense to it, no logic to it.
How close do you think this election is going to be? You talked about how close it was back in 2018 during the early voting period, and election day was what really tipped it in the firefighters' favor. They got 59% of voters approving those caps. What are you thinking it'll look like this time around?
Yeah, it's hard to say. You know, everybody's reading tea leaves right now, and whoever thinks they know what's going to happen on November 5th, don't pay them any money for what they tell you is going to happen, because they have no idea. Mm-hmm. And I have no idea. Here's one negative I will tell you to this is it's at the bottom of the ballot, which is, I'm going to say is a negative, because people are going to be going through a lot of things, and we got to make sure they go down to this spot and vote for these things, for these different propositions, these amendments. And I think that's going to be important. How close is it going to be? I have no idea. I don't, I've many times have tried to predict elections. Sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong. On this one, I'm hoping I'm right and that we will pass these, but I have no way of knowing. I just think that the bottom line is that people in San Antonio are smart. They understand this. And you know what's interesting? I've been on some talk shows and different things as we've been doing this, and people will call in and say, when I started listening to this, I would have never thought. Now, it's made me think. So I'm hoping that people get the information. I'm glad you all are doing this so that people see this and understand the reason of why we need to pass these different opportunities for the city to grow and to become stronger and better.
Even if Renew SA is successful in what you're trying to do, right, to advocate and campaign for these 6 charter amendments. I think the fact that this is a presidential election year, that it's a general election with a lot on the ballot, chances are good that a lot of voters heading to the polls don't follow city politics that closely. They may not be regular, May city election voters. So however effective you may be, you're still going to have a lot of voters who just don't know anything about the city charter amendments at the end of the ballot. Is that good or bad for you?
Well, you want an informed voter. I mean, that's what we're doing this
right. But I mean, this is assuming that there will be a lot of non-informed voters. Is the assumption that they're just going to vote? I mean, the tagline for your campaign is "Finish the ballot strong," which doesn't say anything about the charter amendments. Is the idea that you'll just focus on just voting yes, and the content doesn't matter so much because they don't know.
No, I think the content does matter, and if you can read. I mean, look, people are going to read and understand what this is, and they're going to make a decision accordingly. Mm-hmm. And I think it's kind of. I don't know. I think people are smarter that go into that voting booth, and my hope is that they at least are willing to go to the bottom of it. And that's the point of it. Is that a lot of times people just don't. I've even been guilty of that, where I just like, really, come on, this is taking a while here. There's a lot on the ballot. We're looking at very large numbers, but I think if people will get there, read what it says, they will make the common sense right decision to vote for these.
Before we move on to council and mayoral pay, it looks like the business community may be the only real supporters of at least Prop C. Why is that?
Well, I think there's a lot of support out there. I think when you say only them, I've heard of, a lot of other organizations that I've talked with or spoken with, or people that I've spoken with on a variety of different opportunities. I think there is a general support out there. Mm-hmm. Why does the business community want it? Because look, the business community, like I talked about earlier, they know what it takes to run the city of San Antonio and to manage the city of San Antonio. Mm-hmm. If you're a business owner, you have to have good people or you're not going to succeed. Mm-hmm. And so business people, businessmen and women say, if we do not make an adjustment here, that affects my business. That hurts me. That hurts the city. That hurts my business. That hurts what opportunities we have here in San Antonio, because the person who's in charge of managing it is possibly, if we don't get this done, could possibly not always be the type of person who could move us forward. Right. And I think for that reason, the business community has come out and said, hey, this is a good idea. Yeah. So people who want a strong, good city manager, like business people, yes. Firefighters want a weak city manager so they can manipulate? No. It's pretty obvious what's going on here.
Yeah. How much of it is personal dealings with the city manager to know if somebody calls, if somebody from USAA or whatever, one of our large employers calls up Eric Walsh, to know that what he says will be true in 3 years. and if he doesn't have a tenure cap, it's likely to be, good information. Otherwise, you're kind of having to wonder if the long-term plans he's conveying to you are going to be carried through under a new city manager. I mean, is there any of that to your support?
Well, I think so. I mean, look, consistency is good.
Yeah.
We talked about that before. Cheryl was here for 13 years. Was that a good thing or a bad thing?
Mm-hmm.
Look, the city went a long way in 13 years. A lot of positive things happened. Was everything perfect? Did everybody's trash get picked up right on time? Was everything or every street fixed properly? No. Yeah. But overall, as a city, I think you can look back and say it was not a bad time for this city. I think since Eric has taken over, I think you can say the same thing. Look, and we'll get the council time as well. Consistency of keeping people in positions is important. I'm going to speak from my own perspective on that, if I may. I have 3 assistants. If you were to add up all the years of those 3 assistants, I have a little over 50 years. Okay, and that's just people who are and that little detail makes a big difference because they know how to run. They know what to do. There's a consistency of that. This is a little different, obviously, but even people in my business world back when I did that on a more consistent basis before I became a social worker, is that I worked very hard to keep a consistency of good people. And you never let anyone go for doing a good job. And I think that's what this thing says, is if you do a good job, it doesn't matter, you're gone. There's no logic to that. No, it doesn't make any sense. Does anyone here at the Express News, if you got a good writer and he's one of the best and everybody loves him, but hey, his time is up, he's got to go because there's some rule? No one would think that makes sense. That's what we're talking about.
Terrible idea, Gordon.
It's terrible. That was not directed at anyone, sir.
Let's talk about Proposition E. That's the one that would raise the council's pay from, it's currently about $46,000. It would raise it to about $70,000. The mayor's pay, it's sitting at $66,000. It would go up to $88,000. I want to ask you about something that Renew's SA's website says. It says that raising council pay would, quote, allow council members to focus on representing you and the policies that shape the city's future. And it would make sure that key decisions are being made by the elected officials you choose, not city staff. Can you explain why you see it that way?
Yeah, there's a lot of people think that, first of all, there's a lot of people, and I found this in talking with people, a lot of people still think that the city council position is a part-time job. And I can even go back to when my dad was on council in the mid-'70s. It wasn't even a part-time job then. Back when Henry Cisneros was there, and Lila Cockrell, and Phil Pendis, and Tom Rody, and all those old names. I mean,
when they were getting $20 a meeting.
When they were getting $20 a meeting. And the only reason my dad was able to do that is because he was retired and civil service, and he was able to manage under that so that he could take the job. And otherwise, there would be no way he could do it. And so now we move it to an amount that the amount that was approved last. It got at least to where it wasn't almost, just almost totally unfair to a number that was somewhat reasonable. But now what is being said is, let's put this on something that makes good sense so that we can have everybody who is working on the city council can be full-timers having to carry 2 jobs. There are a lot of council members who have 2 jobs because they can't do it on $40,000 a year. They go and do a lot of other things. And I think that if you can get this number to where it's at, that you eliminate that to where they can then focus. Why does that make a difference? Because you don't want council members walking on that dais on Thursday and being presented something by staff and says, this is what you need to do. Well, that's what you need to do. Well, I haven't had a chance to look at it. That's what you need to, that's kind of what we think. They don't have a chance to read it. They don't have a chance to see it. And by having more of what I'm going to refer to as more of a full-time, because they can finally get paid a reasonable amount, will allow for the opportunity for these individuals to be able to really look at setting policy. Remember, council sets policy. They don't run the city. Mm-hmm. That's what we just talked about, the person who runs the city, manages the city. They set policy, and policy is important. And if you've got people who are setting policy and up there talking about things of which they haven't really truly had the time to educate themselves because they had to go spend 30 hours a week on another job so they could live, okay, because they have 3 kids and a wife and they're trying to live on $40,000 a year, it's not good to the citizens of San Antonio. So let's talk about what that means again and the overall cost of this. first of all, city council members make considerably less than county and many others, but we won't go there. But my point on that is that, my point on this is that the total amount, if you had all 11 of these positions and you take from where it is right now, you're talking about $270,000. $270,000 difference. Okay, $270,000, in my opinion, and it is a great investment for people who sit up there to know what they're voting on and be able to properly be able to discuss it because they've had a chance to read it, they've had a chance to question it, they've had a chance to say, I'm not sure this is right, I'm not sure this is that, instead of walking up there many times, and it's not of any fault of their own, there's just so much time in a day. They have 24 hours just like you do and just like I do. And if they have to spread that among so many different things to where they cannot do that, this is a pay that will allow them, in my opinion, an opportunity to make that to be a full-time job and not have to ensure that that they have to always be thinking about some other way to bring in income.
Do you think, though, that $70,000 is enough to get those folks right now who are working to stop working? And I ask because I would think with some of their lifestyles or what they're doing, that's not going to be enough, and they're still going to need to keep working, whether that's as an attorney, a couple hours a week.
Yeah. I think when someone runs for city council, they know they're going to be a public servant. There's people who are running for mayor right now who know that if they become mayor, that they're losing a lot of money, and so it's not. But it also tells them that they won't have to do their other job. Okay, that's where I guess I'm going here. They know that they're going to lose, that they're not going to make. I mean, you got an attorney. If he's a full-time attorney, he's going to make more than $70,000 a year. But they're committing an opportunity to help the city. They feel committed to it. But when you have $40,000, it just really makes it difficult. I mean, it's not reasonable, if you will. And let's think about who's listening to this. Think about the folks, if you make $40,000, whether you make more or less, and think about moving that to a level a little bit higher, what we're talking about. How that would help you a little bit in respect to being able to say, I could pull back off of some other things. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that if we pay this amount, that they're never ever going to look at their other job. What I'm saying is they're going to be able to justify economically for their family and for them to be able to spend the proper amount of time doing what they need to do. And when policy is set, that makes a big difference to the city. We're talking lots of money difference when policies are set, of how the city is going to grow, how it's going to think. A lot of times we sit back and we go, if only we had done that 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Maybe that's because it wasn't the council at that time wasn't thinking about it or didn't have time to think about it because they were making $20 a week. So let's get into the 21st century here of being able to pay people what is just fair to be able to take on a job that's very tough. I mean, it's a 7-day-a-week job. Anybody who thinks it's not, is just wrong. It is a grind. Those people work hard. You may agree or disagree with what they've done. They may not be always doing the right job, and you could disagree 100% with them politically. But let's be fair about what we pay them.
Now, you've been around a while. So
I don't know what that's. I don't know how to take that, but okay. I have white hair,
we'll say a few decades. Okay, I think that's fair. So you had experience with city council when its members were being paid $20 a meeting, and you have experience with them now. What's the difference between the two councils, generally speaking?
Well, first of all, let's go back to the 70s and talk a little history here. Back then, you would have a city council member making $20 a week sharing a desk with another city council member. They didn't even have their own desk. They didn't have an assistant to actually help them. Okay, That was in the 70s. Now we've come a long way in 50 years or 45 years when that was. That was mid 70s. But so we've come a long way. But the city's come a long way, and the city was much smaller then. So what is the difference? Right back then, some of the issues were considerably different. Things were there was a formation of BIA and a lot of things that happened back then that were very much, that has allowed the city to grow. But you had a lot of people who were very committed at that time to seeing those things happen. You have that now. The thing is, it's more complex now. Okay? Things are not as easy as they were back then. And let's talk about this as well. I could run for city council. I wouldn't have to worry about the finances of it because I've been blessed with that. I should not have that advantage over the next person running. We should all be on equal ground in that respect. And I think that's what this does as well, is allow that opportunity for someone to say, I can run against Gordon Hartman because if I win, I can afford to do that, instead of saying, there's no way I can do that. And I guess, so you get a better sense of individuals saying that's an opportunity for me to serve my city if I want to, versus saying there's just no way. And what I think we are right now, a lot better than 1,080 a year, whatever it used to be at 50 or $20. What was that? 1,080?
Yeah,
1,080 a year.
Yeah, less than two.
And then they took taxes out. And then by the time you paid for gas, you lost money. But my point being is that we just got to get back to some sense of fairness for it. And when you look at the overall amount of dollars of $270,000 and covering all 11 positions, I'm going to use this term a lot. This is a good common sense approach to being able to make the city better. That's all we're talking about here. Like, the reason I'm part of this whole thing is because I think we need to make the city is a great city. We can do things even better than we're doing them. And small little tweaks many times make a big difference. That's some of what's going on here.
Would the business community really be open to having more teachers on council, nurses, social workers, as opposed to maybe corporate attorneys, people coming from the corporate world and then stepping into public service? I ask because a lot of the more progressive council members, Jalen McKee Rodriguez, Terry Castillo, both of them are former school teachers, often don't side with the business community when they're making votes.
Well, I think, first of all, I think right now, I think we have a pretty good council. We're blessed with a pretty good council overall. I mean, I don't agree with everything they do, but I think overall, to answer your question, with the business community, simply all the business community, I think, wants, and I don't speak for the business community. I'm here to speak about why I think this makes good sense from a overall perspective, not because the business community has endorsed it. But I will say this, that business just wants to be listened to, just like any other constituency wants to be listened to. That's all. They don't want anything different. They just want to be listened to. And I think the two council people you talked about will listen to business people. They may not always agree with them, but they'll listen to them. I don't know of anybody who says Terry won't talk to them that's in the business community. And I mean, we got council who will listen, but a lot of times they will disagree as well. And but it's important that everybody be given that opportunity. So let's go back now to those positions. Let's take Terry, for example, who has other things that she has to do. I mean, she's not a full 100%.
She does council full time.
Well, she has a few other things that I don't want to debate that, but my understanding is she has a few other things that she does do as well. Being able to give her 100% of that time to be able to make sure she's able to talk to all constituencies, not just those in her district, because I think she has to represent them but also I think every council member understands they have to be cognizant of the entire city when they're making a decision. And I think for her to be able to have that, all the business community and any body, whether they believe in X, Y, or Z, wants to have some opportunity to be able to talk to them, as well as they need to have time to talk to staff, as well as them being able to talk to other council members. If I'm going to try to get something through council, I have to know how to count to 6. Okay, so if you have to count to 6, you got to spend some time with other colleagues and talking it through and back and forth. And then you got to go to committee meetings, and you got B sessions, and you got A session. There's a lot of time in that. It takes a lot of time to do that. And to pay that person $40,000 a year, come on, that's just not right. It's not fair. That's all this is about, being fair and about allowing the city to have people who open up more doors for more people to run, more people to be able to have an opportunity to say, yeah, I can do that, and I can do it even better versus being limited to having to do many other things.
Let's talk about Proposition F. That's the one that would extend their terms from currently 2 years to 4. It would still cap them at no more than 8 years of service, so 2 4-year terms. Are you concerned at all that extending terms would lead some council members to become complacent because they no longer have to worry about getting reelected and making sure they're meeting the needs of their constituents?
Let's talk about someone who gets elected. I get elected. First thing I have to do is start looking at, first of all, within 6 months, I got to start raising money for my next election. That doesn't make any sense already. There's no logic to that. And we all count in the county. People go, well, we need this accountability. Well, in the county, we have 4 years. Many state offices have 4 years. Many offices are 4 years. Most major cities have 4 years. Okay, all we're trying to do is bring San Antonio to where other cities are, because they recognize the importance of that consistency. Another thing is it's very important that you have some element of understanding that you've got some time. look, I always joke, it probably takes a council member 6 months just to figure out where the bathroom is sometimes because there's the complexity.
I think I've heard John Courage say that.
Oh, is that right?
Same,
okay.
yes.
Okay.
That same thing.
He stole it from me. No, but my point is that it takes time for them to find how things work, who talks to who, how do you get things done. And then during that time, they're raising money and then they're running for re-election again. Okay. It doesn't allow them to say, you know what, I really want to do this for my district. And you don't get that done by snapping your finger. Everybody goes, sure, we'll do that and we'll start on that tomorrow. It takes time to get everybody to agree to you, to get the funding together, to understand through the constituency how it's going to get done. And then from that, then there's a decision made to move forward with it. You can't do something like that in 2 years, okay? And so now you've got someone who says, you know, I would like to really do that. What's the chances of me really getting to the finish line? And that, I think, is a problem. And so if it works elsewhere, why can't it work here? And it can. People say, well, there ought to be accountability. Well, there is accountability. Number one, in 4 years, you can get them out. And if they really do something that they did that was wrong, you can also take them out through a recall. So it's not like you have no ability to do that. But I mean, looking at all these other 4 years, we don't see a lot of recall going on because people recognize they have the opportunity to go to the ballot box in 4 years and remove someone who's not doing a good job for them. But allow them to do their job. Allow them an opportunity to really do what they're being paid to do and being asked to do as a public servant for 4 years so they can really get something done and say, yeah, I started that and I finished it and I started new things as well, knowing that there was a consistency to my opportunity to be at City Hall.
Is there any chance that if city council members have 4-year terms as opposed to 2-year terms, they'll understand something as complex as the $2.5 billion airport expansion? Because I don't get the sense that council members really understand it all that well. Do you think their handling of big capital projects like that changes with 4-year terms?
Consistency is always good in respect to moving things forward that are long-term. It just makes good sense. I mean, it's something I look for, as I mentioned before, and I wanted consistency, and I never let anybody go for doing a good job, you know, for doing a good job. So, yes, I mean, when you're talking about the type of expansion that's happening at the airport, and there's a lot of different, and matter of fact, I know a lot about what's going on at the airport because we're working with the city. As a matter of fact, Morgan's is, in respect making sure it's ultra accessible. Okay, so we're going to have an ultra accessible airport and certain details of that. Did I go to council and talk to certain council members about the need for that and why that's important? Yes, I did. And they listened and they had the opportunity to say, yeah, this is something we want to do. It's going to cost very little money to do it, but we'll be able to make sure that when people fly in here, they're going to have a good feeling on it. That's part of what their job is, to understand even those small details as well as those big details. To have a consistency of the manager as well as people in there for a longer period of time on a project of that magnitude. And that will not be the last one. There will be others because the city is growing. I mean, we were looking at the numbers. We had the most people ever moving out of the entire United States. More people moved here than any other place. We got to manage that. You got to have good policy as to how to handle infrastructure and things like that to deal with that. And our airport, honestly, is behind. I mean, I don't think anyone would say that our airport's, you know, it's a nice airport. Jesus runs a good operation there. But I will say that it's behind. And why is it behind? I think it has to do a lot of what we've been talking about before. Because we put such handcuffs on these council members. We didn't pay them, and we put handcuffs on them. And we said, oh, go do all this stuff. And they said, well, yeah. And so that's what caused, I think, us to
airports
get behind.
Airports are hard. I mean, like, airports are hard to understand. And I mean, it's not, you know, it's for a council member to get into the weeds of airport policies.
Yeah, and now you have a controversy with an airline, a major airline, asking questions about the airport. Well, you need council members to understand what that means and how the city manager is going to handle those negotiations, how that's going to work back and forth. That's not something that's done in a 20-minute meeting. That's something that's looked at and has to be taken seriously. Right. And so that's where I'm going with all this. It's a complex situation. It's changed considerably from back when my dad was on council in the 70s to where it is today, but because it's become much more complex. And it takes more time. Even though back then with him, it was easily a 50, 60-hour-a-week job. But nowadays, it's that, but even tougher. And to even think about the idea of when it comes to the amount of time someone needs to be able to get a job done, also takes more time.
Right.
It's just not the same.
Yeah. Now, council members now under 2-year terms, they've got to show constituents results right away, and for that they need the cooperation of the city manager's office to get a lot of these projects, very short-term projects, done quickly that they can take to voters as an argument for re-election. Does changing the terms to 4-year terms, does that change the power dynamic between council members and the city manager? They'll be less beholden to a city manager if they don't have to turn a project in a year.
Yeah, I mean, I think it allows them an opportunity to know that they can be planning long-term on something to also do maybe a more aggressive project than they were thinking before, which is very positive. Instead of just maybe doing X with the street, maybe we think about it in a bigger way. But also, yes, I think having it to where they can relate with a manager, and even the potential in there of changing potentially a manager during that period. So now you got this short period right now, and then a manager changes. Your ideas and your thoughts on how you wanted to get it from point A to point B to point C to finish doesn't ever materialize. I hear about all the time. Council members have great ideas. Council members are there because they want to see a better city. They're not there for the money. We've been talking about that. They're not for that purpose. They're there because they want to see a better city. Give them a chance to do it. Give them a chance to have someone that once they set policy that they know makes good sense, that they can work alongside them to accomplish bigger, better things. We need to think like those other cities. We need to think like the Dallases of the world, the Houstons of the world, the Phoenixes of the world, the big cities who know how, and those are complex issues, and they've had issues, even though they have put some of these things. Let's not get behind so far that 10, 15, 20 years from now, we're looking at this and going, God, if we had just made those few little tweaks back in 2024, what a difference that would have made for the city. And sometimes we've looked back and done that. Let's not do that this time.
Right. Okay, it's been fun talking about these city charter amendments. Truly fun.
I'm having
you look like it. Yeah. You really do.
Yeah,
but let's spend just a couple of minutes on the mayor's race, the 2025 mayor's race. First of all, you're not in it. Every election cycle, as you know, names start circulating. You're always in the mix. You never run. Are you ever going to run for mayor?
It doesn't pay enough. No, I'm joking. No, joking. Right now, look, I often joke with people that I'm mayor of Wonderland, Texas, and my focus right now is and I love. Look, I spent 20 years as a kid, 20 years in business, and 20 years as a social worker, philanthropist. What do you want to call me? I think of myself as a social worker, but and I love what I do 100%. I did have when I sold all my companies 20 years ago, which is hard for me to believe. It's been that long. I gave some thought to that because I come from a family that has that background, and I've considered myself someone who I think could offer some things to the city. Right now, at this point, I love what I'm doing. And you know what? A lot of my things are going to take a few years to do still. I can't get them done. They're going to take, we built Morgan's Wonderland, we built a camp, we built a sports facility, we built a multi-assistance center where we're getting ready to build a fitness center, an ultra-accommodating hotel, a wonder care facility that helps children with acute special needs, and an institute. I got a lot of things on my plate right now. If down the road those things are moving along in a fashion, I'm never going to say no to the opportunity to be able to give back to the city as much as I possibly can. But no, right now my job is to try to do what I can to focus on something that is incredibly important to me, that has been inspired by my daughter Morgan. And when I sold my companies, I knew that's where I wanted to go, because Morgan is one of the lucky ones. Morgan has what she needs. She has the doctors, the therapists. She has, and she's blessed because we've been blessed. That's the exception to the rule. I want to make the playing field a little bit more even. So that's why I do what I do. And I do it 24/7. I am heavily focused on it. So with that heavy focus at the moment, I will tell you we are building an infrastructure of incredible people that are running a lot of things that we have implemented and started. And we're starting to get way outside Texas and the United States and even worldwide in a lot of things. So let's see where all that goes. I can chew gum and walk at the same time. So who knows what that might lead to. But at this time, I know where my focus needs to be.
In the upcoming election, May 2025, we understand you're supporting Rolando Pablos.
I have
Why is that?
not come out officially as to who I am supporting. Rolando and I are very, very good friends. Rolando is on the Morgan's Wonderland board. Rolando and I became very good friends when he was Secretary of State. He reached out to me because his daughter Mia has special needs, and we developed a certain bond. Here's what I will say: there's a lot of people getting into the race, and all of them are good people. There's a lot of good people running. I mean, we've mentioned some of the names here of the folks that are running. I will be coming out public with someone that I think would be best for San Antonio, and we'll wait and see who that person is.
What are you looking for as you make that final decision?
I think a person who can see us as a city on the go, a city that recognizes that we have enormous potential if we manage ourselves properly. I think some of the success that I had in business is that we always looked at our immediate, but we always looked at also being planners. We were always planning and looking to the future as well. And I think sometimes the city passes that up for the more immediate. And I think we need a person who is mayor who has a strong resume, as a person who has been in the middle of how to get things done and recognizes how to make a true difference. And as I mentioned, there's many good people running for mayor, but there's probably one out there in particular who I think probably can take us to another level.
Do any of the council members running now, that Manny Pelaez, John Courage, Adriana Rocha Garcia, and probably Melissa Haverda at some point soon, do any of them fit the bill you just described?
I think they're all wonderful council members, and I think they all have a good heart in wanting to do the right thing. All four of those people you just mentioned, and many others on the council, are good people. They really are. You may not always agree with them. I disagree with them on things, but they're still, the heart is in the right place. So those four people are saying, look, I've been here 8 years. I want to continue to serve this city as best I can. And we need to thank them for that they're willing to do that. And so do they fit the bill? I don't know if every detail I just said they do, but I will tell you they fit the one that it says that, hey, I believe in my city and I want to make it better.
Gordon Hartman, thank you very much for joining us. And thank you for joining us. Please, if you have not yet signed up for the ENside Politics newsletter, as you're watching this, say on YouTube, go down to the show notes. There's a little link there to sign up for our newsletter. Please do so. Thank you very much, and we will see you next week.